Good morning, everyone. Today, I want to speak about something rarely talked about but deeply felt, the story of a woman with no friends. We often imagine friendship as a basic part of life, something everyone naturally has. But not everyone walks that path. Some women, despite their strength, intelligence, and kindness, find themselves alone, not by choice, but by circumstance. The woman with no friends may be misunderstood. She might be judged as cold, too quiet, too ambitious, or simply different. In a world that celebrates social circles and popularity, she may feel invisible. But let us pause and ask, is her worth measured by the number of people she can call on a Friday night? Absolutely not. In today's society, friendship is often portrayed as a natural and automatic part of life. From childhood stories and teenage dramas to adult social media feeds filled with smiling group photos, we are constantly exposed to the idea that everyone has a circle of friends. We're told that making friends is easy if you're just yourself, that there's always someone out there for everyone, and that loneliness is rare or a personal failing. But this assumption is misleading, and for many, deeply painful. For some women, friendship is not a given, it is a silent struggle. While others effortlessly form bonds over shared interests, workplace chatter, or social gatherings, she may find herself standing on the sidelines, unnoticed or excluded. It's not that she lacks the desire to connect. In fact, she may crave companionship more than anything. But barriers, whether emotional, social, cultural, or circumstantial, often stand in her way. Maybe she moved frequently as a child and never learned to plant roots. Maybe she was bullied during her formative years and developed a mistrust in others. Or maybe her personality doesn't fit the mold of what's considered approachable or fun. Introversion, social anxiety, trauma, or simply a deep sense of not belonging can quietly isolate a person from potential friendships, even when they're surrounded by people. And yet this experience is rarely acknowledged. When a woman says she has no friends, people often respond with disbelief or discomfort. Some might dismiss her as dramatic or assume she must be the problem. Others may feel awkward and change the subject as if loneliness is contagious. This reaction only deepens her isolation, reinforcing the idea that friendship is not only expected, but that lacking it is shameful. But the truth is, friendship is not guaranteed. It is a connection that requires timing, trust, effort, and sometimes luck. It's not always within a person's control. And for the woman who has tried, who has opened up and been let down, who shows up but remains unseen, this truth can be both heartbreaking and clarifying. Understanding this breaks down the harmful myth that being friendless equals being flawed. It opens space for compassion for ourselves and for others. It reminds us that friendship, like all meaningful relationships, is complex. And it teaches us that assumptions are no replacement for empathy. In a world that often values extroversion, visibility, and social interaction, a woman who stands apart, who doesn't surround herself with friends, is frequently met with suspicion or misunderstanding. People tend to fill in the blanks of her life with assumptions. She must be arrogant. She's probably hard to get along with, or maybe she doesn't like people. But rarely do they pause to consider that her story may be more complex, layered with experiences they have never lived through. There is a tendency to label those who are alone as socially inept, emotionally distant, or even cold. For women especially, the pressure to be nurturing, social, and emotionally available is enormous. When a woman doesn't fit that mold, when she isn't actively engaged in friendships or social networks, she is often viewed as an outlier. People may question her character, assume she's bitter or too much to handle. They might think she pushes people away on purpose, or that she enjoys being alone to the point of emotional detachment. But what if her quietness is a defense, not a flaw? What if her lack of friends is a reflection of past betrayals, a trauma response, or simply the result of living in a world where trust has to be earned, but is too often abused? Sometimes a woman has been so deeply misunderstood that she stops trying to explain herself. She may have been open before, vulnerable, expressive, eager to connect, but had her sincerity mocked or used against her. Over time, she learns that not everyone deserves access to her softness, and she pulls back to protect herself. What others see as distance may actually be the final line of her emotional survival. Furthermore, women who are ambitious, driven, or deeply focused on personal goals are often judged harshly when they don't engage in traditional social rituals. If she's career-focused, she may be called cold or overly independent. If she sets firm boundaries, she may be labeled too intense or unfriendly. The truth is, society often doesn't know what to do with a woman who isn't seeking validation through popularity or companionship. These misjudgments can compound her isolation. The more she's misunderstood, the less inclined she becomes to open up. It becomes a cycle. Misunderstanding leads to withdrawal, and withdrawal leads to further misunderstanding. This is not a reflection of her inability to connect, but of the narrow ways we define what connection looks like and whom we believe is deserving of it. To be a woman without friends is, too often, to be wrongly defined by others instead of truly known. In our culture, it is common to associate a person's value with how socially connected they are. We often look at someone's popularity, the number of people they surround themselves with, or how much attention they receive as indicators of their success or likability. Social media has amplified this perception. Likes, followers, tagged photos, group outings, all these visible signs of connection can misleadingly serve as a measure of a person's worth. But this is a shallow and incomplete way of understanding someone's value, especially when it comes to a woman who has no friends. Her absence from the social spotlight does not mean she lacks depth, intelligence, kindness, or substance. It simply means that her life is unfolding differently from the norm, and that her worth exists independently of external validation. A woman may be deeply compassionate and excellent listener, wise beyond her years, or capable of great empathy and understanding, and yet not have a circle of close friends. Perhaps she's focused on caring for a sick family member, juggling the demands of single motherhood, or healing from personal wounds. Perhaps she gives so much of herself in daily life that by the end of the day, she has no energy left to nurture social connections. A solitude doesn't mean she's failed socially. It may mean she's prioritizing survival, healing, or purpose in her own way. Too often, society tells women that being loved, wanted, or popular is central to their identity, that their worth should be proven through relationships, approval, or being chosen by others. But this is a harmful narrative. A woman does not need to be surrounded by admirers to be valuable. She does not need to be part of a group to be significant. Her dignity, her voice, her story, all of these exist whether she has a crowd beside her or not. It's also important to recognize that some women choose to walk alone, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. They have learned that being alone is sometimes better than being in spaces where they are misunderstood, mistreated, or diminished. This choice, rather than reflecting inadequacy, is actually a sign of strength and self-respect. Her solitude may be a sanctuary, not a sentence. Her silence may be a space of growth, not emptiness. Her independence may be an expression of her inner peace, not a cry for help. In truth, The value of a woman cannot be measured by the number of people in her life, but by the integrity with which she lives it. When we encounter a woman who has no friends, it's easy to make surface level assumptions about her choices or personality. But what many don't see, what lies beneath her silence or distance, may be a history marked by betrayal, rejection, or trauma. Her current solitude might not be a preference, but a protective response to deep emotional wounds that have shaped the way she interacts with others. Friendship at its core requires trust. It calls for vulnerability, for opening the heart to another person with the hope that it will be held gently. But when that trust has been broken, whether through abandonment, manipulation, humiliation, or emotional harm, it can become incredibly difficult to risk that kind of openness again. For some women, past friendships have not been sources of comfort, but of confusion and hurt. The very relationships that were supposed to offer safety became places of betrayal, exclusion, or conditional acceptance. She may have had friends who only stayed when things were easy, who turned away when she needed them most. Or perhaps she once had a close bond shattered by jealousy, dishonesty, or competition masked as friendship. The memory of those wounds doesn't fade easily. It lingers in subtle ways, in hesitations to reach out, in guarded conversations, in the instinct to pull away before getting too close. What looks like distance on the outside may actually be a quiet survival strategy built from experience. Rejection can also come from early life experiences. A woman who grew up feeling like she never quite fit in, whether because of her appearance, background, personality, or interests, may carry those feelings into adulthood. She may have internalized the belief that she is unworthy of belonging, or that she must perform or people please in order to be accepted. And after enough failed attempts, she may choose to stop trying altogether, not out of bitterness, but out of exhaustion. Trauma doesn't always come from a single event. It can be the slow accumulation of being overlooked, unheard, or misunderstood over time. It can be formed in environments where emotional connection was unsafe or unavailable, where she learned that being alone was less painful than being disappointed. In these cases, solitude isn't weakness, it's self-protection, and sometimes even survival. To the outside world, she may appear withdrawn, antisocial, or uninterested. But in reality, she may carry a heart full of unspoken pain and stories she's never had the chance to tell. She may long for connection, but be too afraid of the cost. Understanding this truth doesn't excuse her isolation, but it does offer compassion. It reminds us that every wall she's built had a reason, and behind each wall is a person who once trusted enough to be hurt. In a world that often celebrates surface-level interactions and curated social personas, choosing authenticity can be both a courageous and isolating act. For some women, the absence of friendships is not due to an inability to connect, but a deep unwillingness to settle for shallow or insincere relationships. She values depth over appearances, truth over pretense, and honesty over popularity, even if it costs her companionship. This woman has likely observed and perhaps experienced the kind of friendships that feel transactional, where affection is conditional, conversations are superficial, and presence is expected but not meaningful. In environments where small talk substitutes for real conversation and where bonding often relies on gossip or conformity, she may feel out of place. Rather than force herself to fit into social molds that feel false or draining, she opts to step back and wait for something real. There's strength in her solitude, not because she prefers to be alone, but because she refuses to compromise her integrity for the sake of fitting in. She may have tried before. She may have joined in, laughed when expected, agreed when she disagreed, and played along just to belong. But at some point, she realized that wearing a mask was more exhausting than walking alone. Her decision to distance herself from empty connections is not arrogance or antisocial behavior. It's an act of emotional self-respect. She's not looking for friendship that merely fills silence. She's looking for friendship that understands it. She's not interested in relationships based on obligation or convenience. She wants to feel seen, accepted, and loved for who she truly is, not who she is expected to be. This level of authenticity can be intimidating to others. When a woman chooses honesty, emotional depth, and meaningful connection, it can unsettle those who are used to surface-level interaction. People may say she's too intense, too serious, or too much, not because she is, but because they are used to the clarity and presence she brings. And rather than tone herself down, she simply withdraws, waiting for the right energy, the right person, the right moment where connection feels mutual and true. Sometimes this wait is long. It can be lonely. But she chooses to honor her truth rather than betray it. And while others may see her solitude as strange or unfortunate, in reality, it is her silent stand for something sacred, the right to be real. She doesn't want to sit at a table where people don't speak with intention. She doesn't want to be surrounded by friends who don't know her soul. She isn't searching for company. She's searching for communion. And that's far rarer than most people realize. It's easy to look at a woman who walks through life without friends and mistake her solitude for weakness or sadness. But what many fail to recognize is that her path, while quiet, perhaps even unseen, often requires an extraordinary amount of inner strength. To walk alone in a world that constantly pressures people to belong, to be liked, to be accompanied, takes immense courage. It takes a kind of bravery that is not loud or celebrated, but deeply rooted in resilience. From childhood, women are often taught that they should be agreeable, social, and emotionally available, that their likability is tied to their ability to form and maintain relationships. So when a woman defies this expectation, when she stands without a group, a clique, or a support system, she is already pushing against deeply ingrained social norms. Choosing not to conform to the idea that being part of a circle is the only path to fulfillment is an act of defiance, whether conscious or not. She wakes up each day without the safety net others might have. A best friend to call when the day gets hard, a group to vent to, someone to reassure her when doubt creeps in. She navigates her fears, decisions, and vulnerabilities without a shared emotional burden. That kind of self-reliance isn't easy. It can be heavy. And yet she carries it every single day. She attends events alone. She sits through celebrations where everyone else has someone to laugh with or lean on. She hears phrases like, "You should get out more," or "You need to meet people," as though her aloneness is a problem that needs fixing. And still, she moves through the world without explaining herself, because sometimes explaining hurts more than the silence. There's a quiet dignity in choosing to keep going when no one is checking in on you, when no one is offering encouragement or comfort. To remain emotionally intact when you have to hold your own hand through every high and low is no small feat. She builds herself up again and again, sometimes after breaking down in private, sometimes after realizing no one noticed she was struggling at all. Many people think strength is found in speaking loudly, standing tall, or leading crowds. But strength also lives in the unseen moments, in making it through a lonely weekend, in sitting with your emotions instead of escaping them, in refusing to settle for unworthy company just to feel less alone. The woman with no friends learns to trust herself in ways others may never have to. She becomes her own anchor, her own comfort, her own voice of reason. She may not have cheerleaders on the sidelines, but she keeps showing up. She may not have anyone to remind her of her worth, so she writes it into the pages of her own life again and again. Walking alone is not evidence of failure, it is proof of endurance. When people learn that a woman has no friends, their reactions often fall into one of two camps. They either make assumptions or they offer pity. They might say things like, "That's so sad," or "I feel bad for her," as if her situation is something shameful, something to be fixed or mourned. But what this perspective misses is the dignity of her story. A woman who walks alone doesn't need sympathy. She needs to be understood. Pity can be condescending. It comes from a place of perceived superiority, as if the one offering it has something the other lacks. It reduces the woman's experience to a deficiency rather than recognizing it as a choice, a circumstance, or a journey she is navigating with quiet strength. Pity says, "You're broken." Understanding says, "You're human." To understand her is to step beyond surface level judgments and consider the deeper context of her life. Maybe she's been hurt. Maybe she's growing. Maybe she's simply in a season of solitude. Understanding recognizes that friendship, like all relationships, is complex, and that there are countless reasons a person might find themselves without close connections. It acknowledges her emotional intelligence, her boundaries, her capacity for introspection, and her right to live at her own pace. Offering understanding means listening instead of assuming. It means holding space for her story without rushing to fix it. It means resisting the urge to offer quick advice like "just put yourself out there," or "you should try to be more social," as if connection is always a matter of effort rather than circumstance. Such advice, though well-meaning, often invalidates her experiences and can even deepen her sense of isolation. Understanding also involves recognizing the subtle ways she may be thriving in her solitude. She may have cultivated deep self-awareness, a rich inner life, and a strong sense of independence. She may be someone who offers profound insight, quiet compassion, and unwavering presence to those lucky enough to know her. Her lack of friends is not evidence of a lack of value, it's evidence of a life unfolding differently. When we replace pity with empathy, we begin to see her not as someone unfortunate, but as someone courageous. We see her not as someone lacking, but as someone whole in her own right. We begin to acknowledge that emotional resilience doesn't always come from being surrounded. It often comes from having to stand alone. True compassion is not about feeling sorry for someone. It's about standing beside them, seeing them clearly and honoring their journey without judgment. She is not a problem to be solved. She is a person to be respected as she is. In a society that often glorifies having a wide circle of friends, the true power of a single meaningful relationship is often underestimated. We are surrounded by images and stories that equate happiness with having dozens of people around us. Yet for the woman who has spent years in emotional solitude, who has walked through life without the comfort of close companionship, the impact of just one genuine connection can be profound, life-altering even. It's not the number of friends that brings healing or fulfillment, but the quality of the connection. One person who truly sees her, who listens without judgment, who shows up without condition, who embraces her without needing her to change, can soften the years of loneliness she has endured. That single connection can begin to rewrite the narrative she's carried, the one that whispered she was unworthy of closeness or unfit for belonging. This kind of connection doesn't need to be dramatic or loud. It might start with a simple conversation that feels safe, a shared moment of vulnerability, a look that says, I understand. And for a woman who has been misunderstood or overlooked, who has long felt invisible in rooms full of people, that moment of being recognized, truly seen for who she is, can spark a quiet kind of hope. One person believing in her can be enough to remind her that she is not too much or too little, that her silence doesn't mean she has nothing to say, that her independence doesn't mean she wants to be alone forever. A genuine connection can create a space where she can exhale the weight she's been carrying, where she doesn't have to explain or prove herself, where her history doesn't have to be hidden. And what's powerful is that this one connection does not need to be romantic. It could be a friend, a mentor, a relative, or even a stranger turned confidant. What matters is the sincerity, the realness, the consistency. Someone who doesn't vanish at the first sign of discomfort. Someone who doesn't treat her as a project to fix or a mystery to decode, but simply as a person to be loved in her full complexity. One authentic relationship can restore trust in humanity. It can remind her that connection is still possible, that not everyone is fleeting or conditional, that there are people who mean what they say, who don't walk away when the conversation turns serious, who hold space when tears come instead of laughter. And even if the rest of the world remains distant or unkind, that one connection can act as a light in her life, a reference point for what is still good and real. It can help her begin to soften the armor she's worn for so long, and maybe, just maybe, help her believe again in the beauty of being known. So if you see a woman walking alone, don't assume, don't pity, and don't judge. See her for the strength she carries, the battle she's fought silently, the integrity with which she lives, and the grace in her solitude. Her life may not be filled with loud laughter in crowded rooms, but it is no less meaningful. Her story is not lesser because it is quieter. It is simply different, and it is hers. And perhaps one day someone will come along, not to save her, not to change her, but to sit beside her and understand. Until then, she walks her path with courage. And that in itself is a kind of triumph.